Right now on Upfront.
Battle lines.
DOA, dead on arrival.
Lawmakers back in Madison, the political tone already being set.
It's a disgrace. You should be ashamed.
The budget battle looming, the governor preparing his State of the State.
Republican legislators have repeatedly ignored the will of the people of Wisconsin.
Our guest this Sunday, Republican Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, one-on-one. The new revelations just moments away. Plus, Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson inside his new meeting with top Republicans. And Milwaukee Public Schools still failing to comply with state law, bringing back school resource officers.
Then the fight to be the next DNC chair.
I think we have a chance to win back a ton of votes.
The candidate forum's now underway. Wisconsin's Ben Wickler with the new endorsements. Now one of his opponents is with us.
We need to have more folks in leadership who knows what TikTok is.
James Skoufis, the 37-year-old New York State Senator, and his quest for an upset, all just moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A bit of a contentious start to the new legislative session. Republicans in the state Senate moving forward with a proposed constitutional amendment that would ask Wisconsin voters to enshrine the state's voter ID law into the state constitution. The Assembly is set to vote Tuesday to put the question on the April ballot.
Is this move strictly to ensure the courts can't overturn or loosen the state's current?
I mean, it's one factor, but I'll tell you, when we took this amendment up a year and a half ago, we didn't know that Justice Bradley was retiring. We didn't know that the person who was running on the liberal side is one of the main opponents of voter ID. So none of this was put into practice when we had the idea to do it a year and a half ago.
But Senate Joint Resolution 2 being on the floor today is tone deaf. It's a disgrace. You should be ashamed.
All this as both chambers draw their battle lines ahead of the budget fight and new negotiations with Democratic Governor Tony Evers. So to get to it all, Republican Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu is here. Senator, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
It's great to be on today. Thanks for having me.
There was some political chatter, we'll say, last week on the floor of the Senate chambers. You guys came in for the first time. How would you characterize the relationship between Republicans and Democrats and Republicans and the governor headed into this new session?
Right. So I think I've always had a good relationship with I've worked with 3 minority leaders now, try to keep them in the loop of what's going on, try to work with them. Obviously, we disagree on some issues, so we'll have those debates on the floor, but it's important to work together just so the body functions. The governor, it was a little rough at the end of the session last time trying to work with the governor, but he left me a message congratulating me and being reelected as majority leader, so hopefully he's willing to work with us this session.
Why do you think it was a little rough, and has that carried over?
I think a lot of it dealt with sort of the Supreme Court moving from conservative majority to liberal majority, new maps, and maybe the governor thought he might be working with Democrat Senate and Democrat Assembly, so it was tough to get him to work on cutting taxes, things like that. So, but here we are.
Have you talked with the governor since you've been back?
He left me a message. We've been in contact with his office. I personally, when he called me, it wasn't from his normal cell number, so it was a random 608 number, so I didn't answer it. But no, look forward to hopefully meeting with him after he introduces the budget, trying to find some things that we can work together on.
I was going to ask, do you anticipate to meet with him before he delivers the State of the State address?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We've seen some hints of what he's going to introduce in terms of his budget and what he wants to see in the budget. From what you've seen, what you've heard, what is dead on arrival in your mind for you and for Senate Republicans?
Well, all of his policy issues that he's already talking about. We'll pull out all the policy issues right away. It's a budget. It's not a policy vision for the governor. But you know, a lot of the agency requests, the $4 billion in education, K-12 education is way too much. I mean, outside of that, I'm not certain what's going to be in the budget. He said $4 billion was almost too much for him, I think, in education, so we'll see what he puts in there.
What about UW funding? He said he wants to fulfill the full request for the UW system. Where are you on what you think UW needs and what they could get potentially?
You know, I mean, outside of Madison and maybe 1 or 2 other campuses, enrollment's declining. So I'm not sure why it makes sense to continue to put more and more money into a system that's in decline. Obviously, we need Madison to be it's representative of Wisconsin, producing great graduates there, but we will not fully fund the request from the UW system.
And there's going to be a lot of talk. There's already a lot of talk about the $4 billion surplus and tax cuts. Do you anticipate the Senate to introduce its own plan, or do you think that the Senate will work with the Assembly on tax cuts and the surplus?
So in the Senate, we're actually having a Republican retreat here in a couple weeks, just to go over, see what everybody's interested in, trying to sort of game plan. And one of the discussions will be what kind of a tax cut to what everybody are interested in, what's the best way to do that. I think it will probably be towards income taxes, reducing our income tax rates in some respect, so that way everybody benefits from a tax cut. You know, we'll work with the Assembly, but it might be a Senate bill, there might be an Assembly bill, and we'll work together to maybe do both.
Are you open to the retirement tax cuts that Speaker Voss has talked about?
Fully exempting retirement income is probably too expensive right now with the surplus that we have. I think we could maybe exempt some of retirement income. I don't know what that level is.
Are these going to be standalone bills, or all of this going to be part of the budget?
I think it's important to get a commitment out of the governor to cut taxes first before we pass a budget.
And that's something the Senate's going to introduce?
Correct.
Speaker Voss has indicated they're going to bring up Monday processing again. Is that something that you will bring to the floor, or the Senate Republicans are going to get behind this time?
Well, we'll treat, if that bill is introduced, we'll treat it as any other bill, send it to a committee. I was the author of that bill at one point. As long as there's guidelines around it to make sure that, you know, the ballots are processed, not counted, that there can be witnesses involved, I see no problem with that bill.
So you support that as we sit here today with what you just, the framework you just outlined.
Correct.
Will you commit to bringing it to the floor if it passes the Assembly?
Well, like every bill, you know, we have to make sure there's support for it, and I don't know where that's at currently.
Speaker Voss has recently told us that he's going to once again pursue medical marijuana. Are you or any other Senate Republicans closer to backing that?
I think there are members of our caucus who are supportive of medical marijuana. The challenge with the bill that the Assembly introduced last time was state-run dispensaries. I think from our caucus standpoint and my standpoint is, you know, just having a certain number of dispensaries run, growing the size of government doesn't seem to be the best way to do it. You know, if medical marijuana bill is proposed and potentially successful, it's going to have to be prescribed by a doctor or through probably a pharmacy, but it just can't be a backdoor to legalizing recreational marijuana. So that will be obviously the concern of our caucus.
So you do have lines that you would like to see in some legislation, the scenario where this could potentially pass in the Senate.
Yep.
Is your red line state-run dispensary still?
Yes.
Yeah, so no matter what, so that has to change in the Assembly. Mm-hmm. Have you talked with Speaker Voss about that?
I have not.
No. Last session, there was some focus on Megan Wolf, the administrator of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Obviously now has led to lawsuit, and that legal action is still ongoing. Any attempt that you see in your mind that the Senate would take again to try to remove her from her post this session?
It's just really unfortunate that the Elections Commission is dodging their responsibility of, after her term is done, either reappointing her or not reappointing her. It's every 4 years, I believe. It's their job to reappoint the new commissioner and commissioner.
Yeah, administrator. Yeah,
administrator.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commission administrator. Yes.
Yeah, the new administrator. So it's just unfortunate that they're abdicating their responsibility to do that and give us what we have in the Senate is advice and consent, which we do with other, you know, all the governors, secretaries, and things like that.
Does she have any support among Senate Republicans after the November elections?
I'm not sure.
How about yourself?
The last elections, well, there were some issues with the last elections. I don't think it was her fault necessarily. Issues in Milwaukee of having to start over at central count after they had already counted 30,000 ballots, moving them farther behind in central count. We just found out the issue in Madison where they had misplaced almost 200 ballots in the city of Madison. So, you know, there's a lot of concerns over, you know, some of the handling in different localities, but I don't know if that reflects on the administrator.
Broadly speaking, you feel the elections ran smoothly across the state?
Depending on how the state Supreme Court rules on the state's abortion law, is there any scenario that the Senate would propose an abortion ban here in Wisconsin?
You know, we'll see what the Supreme Court does when it finally, it seems like they've been sort of slow playing this issue, maybe waiting till after the April election so they can use it for sure after the November election that we just had. So it could be a wedge issue among Democrats and amongst the Supreme Court. But when they make a ruling finally, if they do at some point, then we'll see what the ruling is and respond at that point.
So it's potential that there could be an abortion ban that the Senate proposes.
It could be a 14 if they make abortion legal full term, or if they keep it at the 20-week, we could try to do it to 14 weeks. At that point, we'll try build consensus and see where our caucus is at, see where the assembly's at.
So if they did keep it at 20 weeks, there would at least be the discussion to potentially restrict it even further.
Correct.
A busy few weeks ahead is Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu. Senator, like always, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the private meetings now underway inside the Capitol this weekend. Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson with Senator LeMahieu and Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. The new insight and the big issues. The mayor is with us next.